All right. Morning, y'all. It's Rayos the Hermit broadcasting live from my Hermit Cove. Nice to see some people in chat at the beginning of the stream for once. I'm not used to that. But yeah. Before we get into the actual reactions, first a bit of news. There's a reason why it was censored for a second at the start there, because I have to show some things that can't really depict on YouTube or Twitch, but you'll be able to see at least you should be able to at least see some of what's going on here. But anyway, for the fans of for Dead Life fans out there who have been reading my fanfic, I've made some important strides in some of the illustrations I draw from the chapters, namely the last color illustration for the Karumi arc, which for the Hungry Girlfriends fans out there is not talking about the hungry girlfriend, but is instead talking about a very homicidal character. But I've been working on this specific piece since like 2023. It was so complicated. I had to put it off for the time being. I've come back to it recently, and I'm like I said, finishing it up, making some good strides in it. But yeah. So today we are starting with Psylocke, Marvel's mind swap mistake from Star Superhero. And interesting, I guess, interesting bit of community lore for this video. This video, and the other one we're reacting to after this, were submitted by. Let me see if I can show that. FIFA RPG, a friend of the show, friend of the community, who submitted these videos. And if you want to submit videos, actually, let me see if I can. I'll just add the link to the description, and if it goes bad, then we'll remove it. But, I'll do that for the other ones off stream. But yeah. So let me see what. Yeah. Hey, mom, that's me. Yeah, Thief is in the chat. So yes, the Psylocke episode. For your information, this was his first video after his rebrand and his move from TikTok to YouTube. Oh, I didn't know that. He's a bit of a refugee kind of thing. Yeah. So yeah, this is a topic I don't know too much about. My main introduction to Psylocke and other sorts of Marvel characters who weren't a part of the cinematic universe. It was all the rage in the 2010s. It's mostly porn of the character, from sites like Twitter and Blue Sky and Gilboru and whatnot. But as a writer and an illustrator, I'm always happy to learn about these sorts of mistakes that big publishers make and whatnot, and how I might be able to avoid them. Because one day I'm totally gonna be one of these guys. I'm gonna be one of these big name publishers, totally.
Psylocke. Or Psylocks, plural, maybe? Because there are technically two of them, but then again, only one is the original, so maybe 1.5 Psylocks is better, but they are both real, so I don't know if counting one of them as less than one is fair. Look, as I'm sure you...
All right, let's see, we're starting out with the classic, superhero fucking confusion in terms of the countless iterations of the characters and which run, what was your favorite run of Superman? Was it run a bajillion in 91 or a bajillion in 90? And you're like, bro, I don't think any human being on the planet could keep up with at this point, a 70-year run. I don't think Psylocke runs that long.
The history of this character is an extremely convoluted one, and it was never supposed to be. It's only like this because of a real-world misunderstanding at Marvel, but luckily I'm here to explain it at least as best I can. No need for a long intro today. Explaining this body-swapping nonsense is going to be long enough as it is. So without further ado, let's talk about the history of Psylocke. Or Psylocks. Whatever. Psylocke's real name is Betsy Braddock, though she wouldn't take up that code name until a decade after her original debut. In fact, her storyline doesn't even start with the X-Men, but it does begin with another iconic Marvel character, a heroic national champion clad in red, white, and blue, someone who believes the ideals of right will always triumph over might. I am of course referring to Captain Britain. For those of you who already know the last name Braddock in Marvel, you saw right through that bit, but hopefully I got at least some of you. And if you don't know who
I
I'm
knew
talking
something was coming, but my Marvel knowledge is, unfortunately, too impoverished to have, to guess which
Brian Braddock, the original Captain Britain, is Betsy's
non-Captain America superhero that would have been. Yeah.
twin brother. While Betsy and the twins' older brother Jamie are both mutants, Brian was not. He got his superpowers from a magical amulet given to him by Merlin. Brief sidebar, if you expect that Captain Britain lore is just going to be Captain America, but for Britain, it is not that even remotely. But regardless...
Okay. This is a very interesting out of context image. Yeah, so it's apparently when Captain Britain fails her world, everyone turns into dinosaurs. Which, I mean,
Betsy got her first taste of superhero action through Captain Britain stuff. Originally, she would just get wrapped up in villain plots and things in the ways that you'd expect from a non-powered sibling of a superhero, but Betsy gradually began displaying telepathic abilities. It turns out that her mutant genetics had subconsciously activated during her teenage years, but she wasn't aware enough of her powers to actually do much with them. Gradually, though, they were strengthening with time, and eventually they got to a point where...
Right, Britannica Rex, like it's basically just saying King Britain, right? Like, I mean, honestly, it's kind of an inspired choice. This is kind of, this is already kind of interesting seeing a bit. I mean, basically, what was a kind of a one-off side character, basically slowly transitioning into, I mean, seemingly a character big enough to have their own, I guess, character in like something like Marvel superheroes, whatever the name of that game is. That's been all the rage recently. I don't actually. I'm terrible with names.
This meant that Betsy was recruited for the Psi division of an organization known as the Special Tactical Reserve for International Key Emergencies, otherwise known as Strike, otherwise known again as basically SHIELD but British. This period in Betsy's history wasn't super long, but I thought her time at the Psi division was worth mentioning because that is where she received training in her telepathic abilities, meaning she was ready for the big leagues. Yes, that means it's finally time for Betsy Braddock to get out into the field, get a superhero identity and a code name, and suit up as Captain Britain. Again, yeah, I did the same bit twice, sue me. This is where you get a little taste of how absolutely insane Captain Britain lore is. Betsy became Captain Britain shortly after Brian's Captain Britain fought an evil version of himself from another universe, also named Captain Britain, but spelled differently. Betsy was actually the one to
Bro, this is crazy.
Finish off this evil Captain Britain as he tried to attack her, and then she used her telepathic abilities to essentially melt his brain, at which point she took his costume, which by the way Captain Britain powers work, gave her the abilities instead. She was then mentored and trained in superhero stuff by yet another alternate Captain Britain named Captain UK. So to recap, Captain Britain fought Captain Britain, then Captain Britain's sister killed Captain Britain, took the Captain Britain costume and became the new Captain Britain to be mentored by Captain UK. I told you.
I don't know why he's talking about like it's so hard to understand. This is a very
to be mentored by Captain UK.
This is a very easy to understand flowchart. Very nothing convoluted here at all.
Hey, I told you, Captain Britain lore is insane. Unfortunately for Betsy, her career as Captain Britain was also pretty short, as she was beaten and blinded by a villain named Slaymaster. Betsy could actually still see decently well because of her telepathic abilities, but she did retire from active superheroing. Her life was looking up after this though, as she got engaged to a secret agent that she met during her time at Strike, and the happy couple moved to the Swiss Alps to live out the rest of their lives in peace. And then shortly after that, Betsy was kidnapped by Mojo. Hey look, several minutes into this video and we're finally at an X-Men character. Mojo is an entire rabbit hole on his own, but for those viewers who are new to the Marvel Universe, he is an entity from a pocket dimension where all of society is ruled by reality TV. Mojo is the top show producer in
What?
this world, and he has a habit of kidnapping superpowered people to star in these shows. This is why he grabbed Betsy. He then proceeded to brainwash her, fix up her eyesight with prosthetics that were actually cameras, and give her the code name Psylocke. Yeah, it originally came from a villain, so I'm kind of surprised that that's what she stuck with, but hey, whatever. Betsy was
Yeah, I guess that was her slave name, but now she's taking it on. She's taking it back.
only under Mojo's control for like half an issue though, before she was rescued by the New Mutants and then helped them to free the X-Men, who Mojo had also captured and turned into babies. That's a whole separate thing. Like I said, Mojo is a rabbit hole that I could do a whole separate video.
So yeah, the reason that Betsy was likely brought in X-Men was because Chris Claremont, the writer, also wrote some Captain Britain comics as well. Okay. And so behind the scenes dynamics, I guess. Interesting. Interesting how those things play out like that.
Video on, but for now, just remember that hypnotizing people and turning them into
What the fuck am I looking at? My bumptious bouncing ex-babies come to pop up. I love you, however do I do it. I'm not reading that in song. Yeah. Runaway is a reasonable reaction to this.
Is a rabbit hole that I could do a whole separate video on, but for now, just remember that hypnotizing people and turning them into different things is already happening in this storyline, because that will come up later in this video. Betsy's help in defeating Mojo led her to become an ally of the X-Men, but not a technical member of the team quite yet. That wouldn't happen until the crisis known as the Mutant Massacre. Betsy was not on the battlefield during this event, but she was telepathically coordinating some things from X-Mansion. This meant that when Sabretooth attacked the mansion unexpectedly, Betsy was the one who had to deal with him. Her bravery during this conflict led the team to offer her full membership, which she accepted, keeping the codename Psylocke and finally joining the X-Men 10 years after her original debut in the pages of Captain Britain. Now we're going to skip.
I mean, honestly, that's just that feels kind of true to life almost, in terms of just the circuitous, convoluted routes from point A to point B. I'm sure unintended, but high degree of verisimilitude there.
Forward 3 years, because it is finally time for the body swap storyline, or at least almost time. Real quick, we're going to pause and I'm going to explain how exactly I'm going to present this story to you, because it is a strange one. I am first going to present this to you in line with current canon. Like if you were in the Marvel Universe and asked Betsy what her history was, this is what you would get. Parts of this are going to be stupid and unsatisfying, which I am well aware of. That's kind of just how it's written. But then once I'm done with that, we're gonna backtrack and I'll give you the actual history of these comics. I'll save details for that segment, but to contextualize now, the only reason the storyline is like this is because people at Marvel, the real world company, messed up, and this is what we were left with. So
we're getting the diegetic and then non-diegetic answers to these questions. Right, makes sense.
Here we go. 3 years pass, it is now 1989, and Psylocke is a valued member of the X-Men. One day, she has a vision that several of the team are going to be killed in action, so she offers, or rather psychically insists, that they escape their situation by using an artifact called the Siege Perilous. The Siege Perilous is kind of like a teleporter combined with a reality warping spell. It does take people to new places, but it also has a habit of overwriting their memories, transforming them into new bodies, and generally just giving them new lives wherever they end up. Terrified of her vision coming true,
I feel like it's not worth it then. There's gotta be safer, like, alternatives, right? Like, I mean, this is fucking the Marvel universe. I'm sure there's like this space stone from the Infinity Gauntlet that you can use to like teleport somewhere safely, right? Though I guess they didn't have access to that.
Her powers to force the rest of the team through the crystal, thinking that it will all turn out fine. She is absolutely wrong about this. The team gets their memories erased and are scattered to the winds. The X-Men are no more. She has basically dismantled them in one fell swoop. Betsy enters the Siege Perilous as well, and ends up with no memories in the South.
Yeah, technically her memories are altered, not fully erased, but close enough.
Sea, where she is captured by a crime lord for the Hand, yes, like the same hand that fights Daredevil, named Matsuo Tsurayaba. Even without her memories, Tsurayaba is able to identify her as Psylocke, whom the public had presumed dead. He knows that she has telepathic abilities and thinks that might be of use to him in a weird situation he's facing. See, the crime lord was in love with an assassin who was in a coma at the time, and he figured that if he could somehow expose her to Betsy's telepathy, that might be able to snap her out of it. So he uses technology provided to him by Mojo of all people to swap their bodies. Very important note here, in the comic where this happens, we don't actually see the assassin involved in this body swap yet. That is a reveal that happens later. What we see at the time is just Betsy in this new body, once again brainwashed into working for a villain under the codename Lady Mandarin. Even in this new form, Betsy has kept her telepathic abilities, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. After all, she's a mutant, her powers should be genetic, and therefore she should not keep them through a body swap. But don't worry.
Yeah, that's classic. I was gonna say comic book writing, but honestly, it's so endemic to like writing generally. People do not care about that kind of difference. They don't even like. I doubt the writers there was even a thought in their head.
Because not only does she still have her powers, they've actually been enhanced a bit. By switching bodies with an assassin, muscle memory has given Psylocke an instant crash course in martial arts. This is also where we get to see her powers used more offensively, leading to the purple psychic knife thing that's become an iconic part of her kit. Psylocke remains under evil influence for a bit, but is later freed by the newly reformed X-Men. However, at this point, the other woman in the body swap.
Bro, how did that story work? Like, you said the X-Men have been scattered to the four corners of the wind and had like new identities implanted into their brains. Like that must have been that sounds like a story all on its own. Which I mean, I guess it probably was depicted in the comics.
Is still nowhere to be found, and the X-Men don't even really make much of an effort to get Betsy back to normal at all. The entire team, Psylocke included, just kind of goes home, and Betsy looks like this now, and
That's... I forgot to read the last bit that I'm covering up, but yeah, anyway, Psylocke and Wolverine go to Madripoor for a while, but never attempt to fix the swap. Like, what? I mean, yeah, I'll let that slide. But like, I mean, I feel like, I think we all know that in real life, like 90% of people would be like, I kind of want my original body back. I mean, now I don't know how long, and how much time has passed since like the start of this whole saga and up to now. Cause maybe Psylocke was getting on years, and he's like, bro, I got a young body, a fit body. I mean, what more could I ask for? Maybe that's what happened. Yeah, as you said, parts diegetically are very, very unsatisfying. Yeah, I feel like that was like the writers just being like, yeah, we kind of want things to go this way, so we're gonna make them go that way. Never mind the like plausible real world consequences of having your body swapped like that.
It'll look like this with no resolution in sight for about 3 years. Remember how I warned you that parts of this would be unsatisfying? Yeah, this is one of those. Time passes.
Okay, it seems like you've I mean, yeah, you presumably you watched this video before sending it to me. But, yeah.
And Psylocke remains an active member of the X-Men even after this ninjification? Is that anything? It made me laugh, so I'm gonna leave it in, whatever. Anyway, after a couple years, a mysterious woman shows up at X Mansion, hopefully bringing some answers. She attacks Psylocke directly, she rips off her mask, oh my god, she looks exactly like Betsy used to, and then she starts this dramatic monologue where she says that she is Betsy Braddock, and she's here to deal with the woman who's an imposter and has been claiming to be her for the past 3 years. Okay, hold on, something is not adding up here. If this is a
I didn't remember it came right after that. Yeah, you printed too much of the story or the video on. I guess that means it left a good, strong impression. But this is interesting. Like it kind of calling. I mean, there's a lot of ways this could have taken place. I guess. I mean, could be that the person the assassin who got swapped into Betsy's body had like a freaking existential crisis and started believing himself to be Betsy Braddock, or even weirder things with the consciousness inside of the I guess current Psylocke is like some weird mishmash that like believes itself to be the original, and I don't know.
For the past 3 years.
Unfortunately, it's probably not going to be half as interesting as either of those scenarios, but let's see.
Okay, hold on. Something is not adding up here. If this is a body swap situation, why are both women claiming to be the real Betsy? Is one of them lying or a double agent of some kind? That would be wild, because as I've said a couple times at this point, it has been years since this began. What the hell is happening? Well, at this point, nobody knows. Not the readers, not the X-Men, not even either of the two Psylocks themselves. They both genuinely believe themselves to be the real one.
Do the writers even know? I'm a little afraid to hear the answer to that. But
it's here that we finally get more information about the assassin whose body Psylocke has been running around in. Her name is Kwanon, we get the whole backstory with her and Surayaba, and we find out about her master, who might be able to give a little bit of information as to this whole debacle. The X-Men are, after all, familiar with Betsy, but Kwanon is new to them, so they hope the guy who trained her might be able to provide some insights as to which one of these women is which. The X-Men take a field trip to Japan to talk to the guy, and it turns out that, he actually has no idea either. Apparently, this situation is way...
all right. Mr. Fencer over here, like his answers, his whole situation is, yeah, you're both who you claim to be. Which, I mean, to be fair, I was saying something kind of like that. Let's see how they make this work.
Anybody was thinking. It turns out that this body swap was not just a body swap. The two women were entangled, in a sense, at a fundamental level. They did switch bodies, but their memories and personalities were also all mixed up with each other. This is also the explanation as to how Betsy kept her telepathic abilities in the new body, which isn't a very good explanation, very much comic book hand-wavy nonsense, but that's what we have. Likely due to those telepathic abilities, Betsy's persona had won out in both cases. This wasn't revealed at the time, but for the sake of giving you guys a good summary, I'm going to tell you what was actually the case. The real Betsy was the one in Kwanon's body, the one who had been on the X-Men for 3 years. The one who looked like Betsy was actually Kwanon, but Betsy's personality and memories had just overridden her own, so she thought that she was Betsy even though she wasn't.
Damn. Poor Kwanon got fucking overwritten entirely.
Does this make a lot of sense? Sure, why not? Ultimately,
I mean, yeah, with the rules that we've been given, yes, it makes sense. The rules don't make sense, but within the rule set, it makes sense.
Matter because, like I said, at the time, they didn't know this. The status quo was just that there were two Betsys, and no one was sure which was the original. No one has any idea what the hell is going on, and even if they had a solution to fix it, they would only have a 50-50 shot at getting it right, and the X-Men don't want to do that to their teammate, so both Betsys are just kind of around now. To avoid confusion, or
I mean, honestly, storylines like this, how to phrase it, like, they're kind of what make these, like, American comic books what they are. Like, you would never see shit like, even in the most, like, long-running convoluted fanfic, I've never seen shit like that, and that's interesting in and of itself. Like, yeah, this is unique shit that you're not gonna really find anywhere else.
At least as much confusion as possible, which is not much in this situation. Kwanon, who again is in Betsy's body and also thinks that she is Betsy, doesn't use the codename Psylocke and instead takes the name Revanche. Revanche being a French word that means revenge, but specifically in the context of reclaiming lost territory.
Damn.
And I gotta admit, that is a cool codename for someone who's trying to beat an imposter in a body swap situation. I will give them that. Then, in a kind of odd move, Revanche also joins the X-Men. She does not replace Betsy, to be clear. Psylocke is still on the roster. There's just two of them now, both of whom believe in their hearts that they are the real one. And if you think that this would be a bad idea, you would actually be completely right. It was a horrible idea. The two did not get along at all, and who could blame them? But fortunately, well, for one of them at least, the problem was about to solve itself as Revanche would die to the mutant-killing legacy virus.
Lord.
In the moment of her death, the telepathic powers of the...
Okay, slight correction. Specifically, the powers get channeled through Surayaba so he can do a psychic healing kiss. I don't even know at this point, man. Yeah, me neither, bro. Me neither. It's a little disappointing if he dies here, and then that's how they resolve, big air quotes, the conflict. Like, that's not very emotionally satisfying. But then I guess as Red or as Thief, oh my god, I called him Red. But yeah, as Thief and Sir Superhero said, there's going to be some very unsatisfying moments here.
Synchronized and finally sorted out their memories. The Betsy who was dying was actually Quanon, and the Betsy who had been Psylocke for the past 3 years was truly the original. However, while this fixed the confusion around the situation, it didn't fix the situation itself. Betsy was still in Quanon's body, and now the Quanon consciousness was dead, and the original Betsy body had been infected with the legacy virus, which presumably meant it wasn't very stable anymore. So Betsy was stuck, and there was no apparent solution in sight. So she remained in Quanon's body for 25 years. Psylocke just kind of accepts that she's fundamentally different now. She starts dating Warren Worthington, aka Angel, who had a similar experience being transformed into Archangel, and on that...
Well, to be fair, there's some nice parallels there. I mean, I guess the writers did their best. I mean, they made the best of this weird-ass situation.
Shockingly abrupt note, we are, done. That is the end of the body swap arc, at least until the present day. Alright, so now that we're at this horrible point, let's backtrack and do that how did we get here section that I promised. To begin with this, I'm going to take you back to one of the first panels I showed in this arc of Betsy.
I mean, honestly, I'm kind of more interested in seeing the non-diegetic explanation of how all this nonsense went down.
Processing her new body for the first time, but I'm going to contextualize it with a couple panels that came right before. The scene begins with Betsy in what looks to be a sort of wardrobe department area. Also, yeah, Storm is here, don't worry about that. But they're looking through at different costume options. Then Betsy gets grabbed and pulled over to some weird machine, presumably the body swapping device, but here she just gets orange goop of some kind poured on her face, and then when the orange goop goes away, she's an Asian woman now. Believe me, that sounded incredibly weird to hear and to say, but I mean, you saw the page, I didn't edit these panels, that is just an accurate description of what this looks like. Now, I'm no expert on body swapping technology, but that doesn't look like what this is at all. I don't exactly know what this looks like, but it's not a body swap. And there is a reason for that, a reason that we can find by turning to the writer of this book, a guy named...
Bro's got the fucking Uncle Sam pointing at you pose going on here.
Chris Claremont. Now, for those of you who are big X-Men fans, that is not a new name to you, but for those of you who are new to the space, Chris Claremont is one of the most important X-Men writers of all time. He wrote the series for 16 consecutive years. He has had a massive impact on mutant characters and really Marvel as a whole, and many...
Yeah, it's a non-diegetic story that makes the video interesting.
Many of your favorite mutants would not be who they are today without Claremont's influence. Here's the thing though, Chris Claremont is great and we should all be appreciative of his work, but also, he is a huge freak. It is unfortunately common knowledge within the dedicated fan base that Chris Claremont has a lot of, I'm going to use the more kid-friendly term, interests. And he puts these interests into his writing with shocking levels of boldness. His favorite thing to do is...
as an artist and writer myself, all I can say is more power to you. That's how you unlock your full potential as a creative person.
Modify and transform people in some way. Characters in Claremont books will get hypnotized, have their personalities altered, have their bodies twisted into weird forms, he will gender bend them, and in some cases, he will even change their race. You might be able to see where I'm going with this now. Yeah, the reason that this body swap to save a comatose ninja doesn't look like that at all is simply that it wasn't that at all. I mean, come on, it explicitly says that the reason for this makeover sequence was that they, quote, can't have a Westerner running the Hong Kong underworld. This was not a body swap. It was just Claremont doing what Claremont do. The one good thing about these little Claremont transformations was that they were never permanent. He would modify somebody for an issue or maybe an arc, but then once he had his fun, they would go back to normal. So why did Psylocke...
Yeah, I was to say what was unique about this situation that resulted in 25 years going strong of Psylocke being this way up into Marvel Rivals? Like, is that a part of her character in that story? Like I said, I know basically nothing about Marvel outside of the cinematic universe. I've never played Marvel Rivals, so like, is that touched on in the, like, does she have some voice lines that talk about freaking like her consciousness being swapped? Like,
get stuck like this for so long? Well, that's because during the Betsy Turns Asian arc, Chris Claremont was fired.
Damn.
The exact reason for Claremont's firing is kind of debated. Actually, the official stance from Marvel is that he left of his own accord, but internal accounts tell a different story. I'm not gonna dig into that. Regardless, Claremont was out, and control of the
Were people like fed up with his freaking freakiness? Or like, all right, that's one transformation too far. You Claremont are gonna be transformed into an unemployed person.
X-Men passed to another writer named Fabian Nicieza. Fortunately, Nicieza is an incredibly talented and iconic writer as well, so the switch should have been pretty seamless. Unfortunately, we know that the two writers didn't get to communicate about the transition as much as they probably should have, and by his own admission, Nicieza only kind of skimmed some of the X-Men books leading up to his takeover. This means that he kind of just got the X-Men in the state that he got them and had to go forward from there. One of the weird status quo features of this was inexplicably Asian Betsy Braddock. It took a bit, but eventually Nicieza decided to resolve this weird hanging plot thread, but rather than the correct guess of this being an arbitrary decision by Claremont, he made the actually pretty reasonable assumption that it was an unfinished body swap story, and that's what he wrote it as, adding in the whole quantum thing years later. This means that in a hilariously ironic twist, the reason this body swap story is so convoluted is that it kind of went through a thematic body swap of its own halfway through, and all the nonsense that followed was them trying to reconcile the confusion that this mistake had caused. To use a technical term, we in the industry would call this a big, stupid mess, and the sheer level of complexity was probably one of the reasons that Marvel mostly just dropped it for the next couple of decades, but it wasn't the only reason. The other issue was that Psylocke was actually a very cool character and extremely popular to boot. This might not sound like a...
I mean, yes, as I mentioned at the start of the video, I've seen many an art of this character, and I mean, it's a very appealing character design, so I mean... Like, I can see why the Marvel writers were like, we can't get rid of this. Like, we're gonna go back to the old Betsy. Like, no way, we can't. No, don't even play with
first, but oh boy, it was. Remember, at the time that this body swap arc actually started being written as a body swap arc, it had been several years since the transformation itself had happened, and this was the 90s, when the X-Men were massive and growing rapidly. So Psylocke had gained a following, not just as a cool character, but as a cool character who was also the main Asian representation on the team. To put it simply, this means that if Marvel wanted to return Betsy to her normal form quickly and quietly, they had waited too long and absolutely missed their window. This left them with two options. Option one was to just publish a storyline that fixed it and returned her to normal, but this would require them to publish a comic in which they took their most popular Asian character and turned her back into a white woman.
Yeah, no, don't do that.
That wasn't something that they wanted to do for a very valid reason. This left them with option two. Leave it and just never, ever, ever, ever bring it up. This would ensure that the character of Psylocke would always remain a little bit weird and uncomfortable to people who knew the history, but it would prevent a massive explosion. So that is what they went with, and with few exceptions, Psylocke just stayed in this form and they pretended the body swap never happened for 25 years. So how did this eventually get fixed then? Because thankfully this is not the status quo of Psylocke anymore.
It got fixed?
Betsy has returned to her original form in a switchback that happened in 2018. 2018 was not the best year for mutant kind. They were still recovering from Marvel's failed Inhumans push of a couple years prior, and in the next few years they would go into a pocket dimension arc and then an entire overhaul, that being the Krakoa era. Plus, you know, this was when the entire world was right in the middle of Avengers fever, so the X-Men had been firmly replaced as Marvel's most popular team. If nothing else, though, this gave Marvel an opportunity to fix Betsy Braddock with the least amount of people noticing, and that is exactly what they did in the pages of a very small event called Hunt for Wolverine. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I have not read Hunt for Wolverine outside of the few issues I needed to research for this video. In fact, I had never even heard of it before researching for this video, which makes me think that it probably wasn't.
Anyway, this was a version of Psylocke that was in all of the popular TV shows and video games. You mean like the Asian one or the original body Betsy? Or, I mean, based on what I've seen, it's you're probably talking about the Asian Psylocke. Yeah, at the time when X-Men was the biggest franchise in Marvel. Oh yeah. Okay, that's probably what you're talking about.
Very good. I could be wrong about that. I do not know everything about Marvel, and maybe people in the comments will clown on me for not knowing this event, but also, like, I'd never heard of it, so what does that say?
I mean, it sounds like it's not really possible to know everything about Marvel. Like we have apparently 25 years worth of material on just this one character, and I'm sure there's like dozens of other just X-Men with equally convoluted stories in different ways. So like, I mean, anyone who's legitimately clowning on him for this is like goofy AF.
Regardless, the Psylocke thing does not happen in the pages of the main book. It happened in a tie-in miniseries called Hunt for Wolverine: Mystery in Madripoor. One of the main antagonists of this comic was a psychic vampire type lady named Sapphire Styx, and Sapphire Styx basically just kills Psylocke and absorbs her consciousness, but
Okay.
largely thanks to Betsy's telepathy, she is able to survive as a sort of remnant within Sapphire's mind. Eventually, Betsy is able to fight her way out of Sapphire's mind and uses the villain's power to construct a new body for herself. Since this body is based on her consciousness, though, it's her normal form, not Quanon's.
I mean, I feel like that's not how that would work, right? Like, if you spent, like, I don't know how old she was when she became Asian Psylocke, but I mean, it's, I guess we don't know how much time in universe passed for it to be in that body. I was imagining, like, not like, you know, if it's been like 20 years in our world, in our time. I mean, by that point, you probably, your mind would probably feel like the body you've been swapped into is your real body at this point. I can't imagine it's you would keeping going around feeling basically body dysmorphia for 20 years and not saying anything about it.
Which is actually a pretty good way to resolve this in a way that makes sense with the lore. Not surprising,
Yeah,
since
that is
it's
true,
written
though,
by
yeah.
Jim Zub, who's a great writer and a cool guy. I met him in a hotel elevator at Emerald City Comic Con last year, and he was super nice. That's not really relevant to the video, but shout out to Jim Zub. So
Okay.
after
Good to know.
2.5 decades, Betsy finally looks like Betsy again, and we can move forward into the Krakoan era. Well, technically we move into Age of X-Men next, but that was like a reality warp thing that doesn't really affect canon that much, so we're just gonna skip it. Krakoan era now. In this new period, Betsy actually gave up the identity of Psylocke entirely, preferring to redefine herself now that she was no longer tied to somebody else's body, which makes sense and was a smart move from the writers. They didn't get rid of her, to be clear. Betsy has not been sidelined at all. She's still a very important character, but they rebranded her by tying her back to her original roots.
And we still got Captain Britain down here. I wonder, I mean, what the hell was his story? What was he been doing in all
with
that time?
Captain Britain. Now, I know it's been a while since I've mentioned Captain Britain in this video, but remember that this history is mostly focusing on the body swap, and there's a 25-year time skip in there. There's a lot of Psylocke stories in that 25 years, and Captain Britain does keep coming up. It is a part of her character.
Yeah, she's fighting Merlin on this page, which I realized in editing was not clear at all. Yeah, I don't. In all the depictions and descriptions of Merlin, I don't remember him ever being described as having like a gold segmented bodysuit.
This didn't come out of nowhere. Shortly after the founding of Krakoa, Brian Braddock falls under the control of sorceress Morgan Le Fay, and Betsy takes up his amulet, gaining his power and becoming the new Captain Britain, a title that she still holds to this day even after the fall of Krakoa. Though I am going to have to save explanation of those stories for an eventual Captain Britain lore deep dive because,
Yeah,
well,
please,
I've already done a lot in this video. If I have to explain the Captain Britain Corps and Merlin and Otherworld and Saturnine among many other things,
Lord.
I will explode, actually. The point is that Betsy is still around.
To be fair, I mean, in this day and age, I think people would be fine with like a fucking 3-hour sprawling, like, just expose? No, not. And just, a video just describing all the ins and outs of this thing. I can't think of a better word for it than just this thing.
She's back to her normal self, and she is using that self to have a lot of cool new superhero adventures. And if you're wondering what happened to Quanon, don't worry, she's actually still around too.
Wasn't her consciousness destroyed?
While, but thanks to some comic book nonsense, when Betsy restored her original body, this
comic book nonsense. Everything is forgiven.
Led to the spirit of Quanon returning to the corpse that Betsy was no longer occupying.
What?
From there, she joined the nation of Krakoa and kept the Psylocke identity since Betsy didn't want it. She hasn't been in nearly as many comics as Betsy, but
I like how they're treating identities as if they're like just costumes. Like, I mean, I know for these superheroes who have their secret identities and all this, maybe for them, an identity is basically just a costume that you put on and take off as easily as a shirt or whatever. But like, damn, they're talking about these like incredibly life-altering decisions. Like it's nothing. Like, I mean, didn't Quan have like family and friends who would be like a little weirded out by her consciousness no longer being in her body?
Has done quite a bit, and she does have a solo comic coming out right now. And when I say right now, I mean like as of the day I'm recording.
Don't worry, the Captain Britain video was made. It was 40 minutes long. I don't doubt it. I do not doubt it.
Coming out right now. And when I say right now, I mean like as of the day I'm recording this, issue 2 of the series released yesterday.
Right.
Also, I should at least throw this in at the end. If you're curious whether the Marvel Rivals version of Psylocke is Betsy or Quanon, the answer is actually neither. That version of the character is from a series called
Why did I expect anything else?
Demon Days, which is a feudal Japan AU. This one is not only Psylocke, she is actually named Psy. S-A-I, meaning that she's not a direct variant of a main universe Psylocke. Think of it more like a Peter Parker and Miles Morales situation, where they are versions of the same superhero, but not the same person. Though...
Okay. Alright, I'll accept it.
Given that she is actually a Japanese assassin, she is much more like the Quanon version of Psylocke, so if you really need an answer, closer to Quanon. And with that, there we go. First full-length YouTube video done. I actually don't know how long this one is going to turn out because I'm recording this ending before a couple of the other segments are finished, but I know it's going to be longer than 10 minutes, so hopefully it was worth it. If you watched this video all the way through to the end, thank you, genuinely. No matter if you found this through my original TikTok audience or purely through YouTube, I really do appreciate it. Whether this TikTok ban does eventually go through or not, this pivot
this was made during
weird for me, so I really do hope
this was made during the whole furor around the TikTok ban 10 months ago. Wow, crazy to think about that. That was 10 months ago already.
Enjoyed this video? Big shout out to Ruben Perez for drawing all the poses of the character that you've been watching me talk through for the last however many minutes. If you're curious who this character is and what it's
well-made, I guess PNG tuber.
Like when I tell superheroes,
as one myself, you know, I can tell when they're well made.
Stories of my own, you should check out my TTRPG show, The D and Dorks, also on YouTube. The season of that show that this character appears on is called Power Play. It's largely about how superheroes and the news media interact. Actually, if you're a fan of Mojo, who I mentioned a few times in this video, this will be right up your alley. Also, not to toot my own horn, but I do think it's the coolest thing I've ever made. As for this channel though, I have several more things in the works already, so one more time, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for a whole lot more.
Alright.
So
yeah, it was definitely very interesting. I mean, I mentioned somewhere during that during the reaction that like definitely one of the most interesting things about the American comic scene that I really don't see anywhere else. Like I said, not even fanfic, which are famous for their convoluted ass storylines. Like is storylines like this that just they kind of meander in these almost drunken sort of ways, but you know, oftentimes there's lots of good writers on there who are able to take these crazy twists and turns and make something interesting out of them. It's like you just don't see that in any other medium, at least that I'm aware of. So I mean, that's something unique and interesting about the American comic book scene that I hadn't realized, and I haven't really heard described anywhere else. I mean, I remember actually watching just a few days ago this video on how like the Japanese comic scene has sort of overtaken the American comic book scene, and I mean, yeah, it made sense. Like the Japanese comics or manga have a lot going for them, especially now that the American comic book scene just cannot match them on. But I mean, yeah, this goofy fucking shit went on for like 2.5 decades. Like that's all American comics. Like there no other. Yeah, there's no other medium or style of storytelling that I'm aware of that does stuff like that, and that's that's interesting, and I suppose valuable all on its own. So now we are going to be moving on to the second part of today's stream. Yep. Let me see if I can. Yeah, characters outliving the writers is the most unique aspect of American comics. And yep, manga only has to happen when it's huge, like Dragon Ball, or also Berserk. Because normally they do tend to finish. I think it's more common for the writers to finish either finish the story, in Japan, or the story gets axed and then it's ended that way, one way or the other, however unceremoniously. Yeah, it's definitely very rare to see other people take on the mantle of a thing, because normally the Japanese comics are the brainchild of one artist, whereas that's a lot less common in American comics. All right, let me see the little blurb I wrote for this video. For the why K-On! Is so popular with Nazis. Well, specifically Twitter Nazis. Let me see if that's enough. Yeah, normally like to write a little thingy about it, so I'm not just totally winging it when I start my intros for the video. But let me. Yeah, I think I got enough. Okay. So hello everyone, this is Moon Channel's video on why is K-On! So popular with Twitter Nazis, which on the face of it sounds like a very bold declaration, but I think anyone who has been on social media long enough has seen the anime PFP profiles that are spewing the most vile shit you've ever heard. There's some just out in the wild evidence of this phenomenon, which is very interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing about it, but yeah. I mean, when you think about it, it's not uncommon for very, very, very bigoted people like this to have some kind of like exception. Like there's almost, these people almost always have someone or something that they consider to be one of the good ones, which is kind of interesting. Like it kind of reminds me of the kind of the Jungian concept of like I think the shadow, and like related concepts like the rubber band effect, like this idea of like the harder you go in one direction, the more extreme and frankly fragmented and unintegrated the inevitable snap in the opposite direction is. And I think in a weird way it kind of speaks to the I don't know what you call it, like the humanity's trying to claw its way out of these people. Like you can't be that hateful and vile forever. Like eventually some part of you is going to be like, I want to love something. I'm going to be affectionate towards something. And I think maybe we'll see, I guess. But one pressure release valve for these kinds of like in these people, in these bigots, these suppressed feelings of companionship and camaraderie are like fictional characters like K-On! And other anime characters that become PFP picks. But yeah, let's see if my little hypothesis has any weight.
And there's very little conflict. Just look at how warm and cuddly this hug looks. Isn't that nice?
Let me actually go back to the beginning.
K-On! Is a lighthearted, joyful anime about 5 high school girls starting a band. The characters are adorably designed, the plots are cheerful and bubbly, and there's very little conflict. Just look at how warm and cuddly this hug looks. Isn't that nice?
Oh yeah,
doesn't it?
Forever. I've never watched K-On!, but I've heard great things about it from non-Twitter Nazis. So I mean, it's definitely a cute show, and apparently Bocchi the Rock that came out a few years ago was basically just K-On, but for the modern age, for us post-pandemic folk who can't imagine such peaceful, non-socially anxiety-filled days.
Make you feel good. The show is as wholesome as animation gets. And yet, there is something of a long-running paradox, almost a meme concerning K-On, and that is that K-On happens to be particularly popular amongst apparent Nazis. Or more precisely, K-On happens to be particularly popular amongst apparent...
Don't mess with K-On fans. We are violently racist. I mean, I appreciate the honesty. It makes it really easy to avoid them, I guess.
Nazis. Or more precisely, it's especially popular amongst certain maladjusted, antisocial young men who often adopt the appearance and eventually politics of extreme nationalist populism. I imagine many of you have seen it yourselves on a social...
Earth. Let me get out of the way so you can see this dolphin with like MS Paint style hair. I mean, that's probably like an anime character hair. It's probably a hairstyle of an anime character, but I guess I don't know enough anime ball to recognize this character.
Media platform of your choice. A hateful comment paired with a cute anime girl avatar. But why? Where's the crossover between embittered young men and carefree teenage girls? How does an innocent slice-of-life anime become a signifier for antisocial behavior? It's a story in a sense without specific villains.
I mean, to be fair, the Japanese otaku who I'm sure if they were American, they would probably be greater, like they probably have a greater than average representation for what the fuck does that say? It's like, is that book the catcher in the Rye? Wait, is that? Wait, let me. Okay, okay. I'd forgotten. But yeah, this kid is okay. Yeah, he's definitely an otaku. He's definitely an otaku. He's reading fucking The Catcher in the Rye. Like, oh my lord. Even the Japanese are reading, are getting. Even the Japanese teens are getting radicalized by fucking Catcher in the Rye.
Many victims. And it is a story with roots far older than you might realize. Roots which give way to a modern problem deeply exacerbated by societal forces. So why do these bitter, angry young men cling to one of the softest, sweetest anime ever made? And how can something so gentle and sweet exacerbate bitterness and alienation? Let's find out. And we'll start this time with a little bit of literature. In the year 1951, American author J.D. Salinger published his one and only novel, a story about a young man named Holden Caulfield who encounters a world that doesn't seem to...
Yeah, having seen that in that screenshot of that, whatever anime that was, I was really interested in seeing, honestly, getting a reminder of what the story is about, because I've heard that it's apparently like the siren song for a lot of incel types and like similar social circles, whatever you want to call them. So.
To have a place for him. He's alienated by society and in turn disgusted by it, by its superficiality, by its hypocrisy, by its what he calls phoniness. If you, like me, are American, many of you were forced to read this book in school. And if you were forced to read Catcher...
Lucky for me, I don't remember ever being made to read that one. I read things like The Scarlet Letter and The Yellow Wallpaper and stuff like that. It sounds like a lot of people, understandably, I think. And I'm not too much of a fan of Catcher in the Rye. I mean, I remember hearing these apparently. He just sounds like a standard 14-year-old kind of whiny kid. But unfortunately, a lot of adults even, find these sort of really just normal growing pains that a lot of people go through. I mean, hell, even I went through similar things as a 14-year-old. But unfortunately, a lot of adults seem to not grow past that phase.
In the Rye, it is very likely that you came away hating Holden and not relating to him at all. But of course, that's kind of the point, right? That's the meta layer to this book. Of every 10 readers, I'd say maybe 9 find Holden to be whiny, immature, and nonsensical. But I promise you, there was at least one person in that 10 who saw themselves in Holden Caulfield, and felt alienated by the other 9 people who simply never got it.
I mean, yeah, to be fair, this is, like, Holden's obviously carrying a lot of trauma, and his need for personal connection is unfilled. I mean, yeah, that's how to phrase it. I mean, oftentimes these, I mean, as someone who was a teenager, I don't think I was ever a whiny teenager. I was more like a self-righteous prick teenager. But, as someone who was a teenager, those annoying ass tendencies are often coming from, unfulfilled desires, and maybe even a little trauma that hasn't been unpacked yet, and you haven't learned healthier and just less annoying ways of expressing these issues and pursuing, like, maybe not solutions to it, but trying to resolve these feelings. You're still in the initial stages where everything's all raw and still hurting and whatnot.
There's one section of The Catcher in the Rye that kicks around in my brain sometimes, and if you were indeed forced to read this book when you were a teenager and hated it, I encourage you to go back to it now with the perspective of a stressed and weary adult and try reading it again. The context is this. Holden Caulfield has been drifting around New York, as one does, becoming increasingly disillusioned with the phoniness of the adult world. He then visits his younger sister Phoebe, who is one of the only people he genuinely loves and trusts. And as he grumbles and laments his circumstances, she challenges his worldview by asking a simple question. What do you want to do with your life? To which Holden responds as such. I keep picturing all these little kids playing some game in this big field of rye and all. Thousands of little kids, and nobody's around, nobody big.
I've heard this quote.
Except me.
It's a quotation.
I'm standing on the edge of some crazy cliff. What I have to do, I have to catch everybody if they start to go over the cliff. I mean, if they're running and they don't look where they're going, I have to come out from somewhere and catch them. That's all I do all day. I'd just be the catcher in the rye, and all. I know it's crazy, but that's the only thing I'd really like to be. Do you get it? If you once read this book and scoffed at this passage,
that sounds, it's just like a very noble thing to do. I mean, I'm not sure if it's a good idea to make that. If it's a good idea to make that your only calling in life. I think after 20 or 30 years of that, you're probably going to be a little disillusioned. You want to do other things, but I mean, it seems like when to allow kids to play safely and be one of the I guess guardrails that protects them from really themselves. Like you said, a kid could easily not be paying attention, end up falling, or hurting himself. It doesn't have to be something as literal as the specific example he gave, but just anything where you're protecting kids from their own naivete kind of thing.
You get it now. Holden idealizes innocence. Ignorance is bliss. At some point, we must all grow up and face reality, engage with the responsibilities of adulthood, engage with our sexualities, with relationships, and the myriad seemingly impossibly complex troubles of the world. But the world of adulthood, the so-called real world, has been constructed in such a way that is phony. It is deeply inauthentic, more so now than ever before, and it takes active effort as an adult to ignore the dissonance and merely exist. And Holden sees his little sister and thinks to himself that if he could, he'd shield her and innocent, pure beings like her from this inauthenticity and corruption.
Okay, I'm kind of seeing where this could, how to phrase it. I'm kind of seeing how, if angled improperly, this could result in the titular Twitter Nazis. Like I keep notes while watching these videos. I've been, one of my hypotheses here is that K-On! Other anime like it being too idealized is actually it's on one hand the thing that tempts, or what's the word, appeals to these people and really a lot of people, but because it's too idealized, it makes reality, in contrast, even more disappointing than it otherwise would be. And yeah, I haven't watched enough of the video to see how that might mess with what we just heard. But yeah, I mean, like as someone who's, I don't know what you call it, like, not really much of an idealist. I oftentimes don't relate to these feelings Holden is expressing, of like this idea of the adult world is so dirty and so not innocent or whatever. It's like, I mean, yeah, I mean, you know, that's how it is. But I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm a little like I'm not the best person for that kind of thing. Because I mean, I remember as a young black kid watching Nat Geo documentaries about fucking racist ass neo-Nazi skinheads, and just being like, yeah, I mean, yeah, these are people who would hate the fuck out of me just because of the color of my skin, and I'm like 9 years old watching shit. And I was like, okay, yeah, those are just things things to watch out for, just like the whole, like, you know, watch out for the strangers in a windowless van kind of thing. That, you know, it's just one of the things to watch out for. Like someone like that, someone who grows up in a situation like that, you can't really be innocent in the way that Holden is idealizing, because, I mean, you're not allowed it. Like, it's
the bitterness of reality. In his mind, it's not a selfish endeavor, but a selfless one. His own needs aren't even a part of the equation. He sees himself as a lost cause. This theme of being a lost cause, an alienated and excluded.
I mean, like, yeah, one of the most dangerous things for your own personal, I guess, happiness is to consider yourself a lost cause.
Person, abandoned by society, but still having the power to protect the innocent, or more precisely, to protect innocence, has led to Catcher in the Rye becoming something of a cultural totem for what society deems to be disturbed young men. In 1980, Mark David Chapman assassinated John Lennon of Beatles fame. When the police arrested Chapman, he was carrying a copy of Catcher in the Rye, which he declared to be his statement. When Robert John Bardo murdered actress Rebecca Schaeffer, he too carried a copy of Catcher in the Rye during the crime. It's incidents like these that have given Catcher in the Rye a sort of a reputation as a dangerous book. People who don't understand the book or the Holdens of the world believe that the book inspires the behavior, thereby banning it from libraries or schools, when it is in fact the opposite. The book gives these alienated young men of the world a voice to speak through, even if 9 out of 10 people can't hear it. Which is to say, J.D. Salinger wrote Catcher in the Rye, but he didn't invent Holden Caulfield. There are Holden Caulfields all around us, and there have been since time immemorial.
Yeah.
A prototypical example might be the ancient Greek myth of Hippolytus, written in 428 BC by none other than Euripides in the form of a stage play. At the opening of the play, the goddess of love, Aphrodite, explains to the audience that Hippolytus has sworn a vow of chastity.
Always a big fan of this rendition of Aphrodite for
refusing to
no reason in
her
particular.
And instead choosing to honor Artemis, the virgin goddess of the hunt. Let me perform for you a little snippet of the play, wherein Hippolytus talks with a servant as he stands before a statue of Aphrodite.
How then, no word for a high and mighty goddess?
Which, careful lest your tongue commit some slip.
The goddess here, who stands beside your gate.
I greet her from afar, for I am pure.
Yet she's revered and famous among mortals.
I do not like a god worshipped at night.
My son, to honor the gods is only just.
Men have their likes, in gods and men alike.
I wish you fortune, and the good sense you need.
Hippolytus, then, in so doing, offends Aphrodite, and long story short, he gets accused of deviant behavior and dragged by his own horses off a cliff to his untimely demise. Lester G. Crocker, a professor of history at the University of Virginia, observes in his article on interpreting Hippolytus, as published in the Journal of Philologus.
Oh, good beginning interpretations. I was a little lost there. My Greekanese is not advanced enough to really read in that, but it sounds like he was just saying, like, yeah, I mean, I got my taste like everyone else in Aphrodite, despite being the Greek goddess of love, is not, she's not my cup of tea, which she took umbrage to.
Hippolytus exists as a symbol of chastity, of purity, and in so doing he is guilty of an excessive pursuit of an ideal that humans cannot attain, as it is against the nature of men to totally reject sex. that by attempting to become an embodiment of purity, Hippolytus is attempting to be more than human, akin to a god, which is an act of hubris, a moral blindness born of pride that invites self-destruction. In attempting, in this case, to guard or embody innocence, Hippolytus commits an existential crime and is punished for his attempt to rise above by falling tragically to his death. It's a metaphor. Euripides is arguably making the point that Hippolytus and men like him mustn't obsess over or take pride in purity. By scorning Aphrodite...
I mean, definitely... I personally always consider a bit of a red flag if I come across anyone who is a little too obsessed with purities. It often has some very unsavory bedfellows.
Hippolytus puts one aspect of human nature on a pedestal while denying another, and to the Greek mind of the time, that is rejecting the natural order. The whole story seeks to warn men like Hippolytus away from such innocence-obsessed behavior. An obsession over innocence, over purity, is unnatural. Now look, I get it. This myth doesn't map exactly upon our overall narrative, but consider this. The idea of alienated young men obsessed with specifically innocence and spurning love, as well as warning against this behavior, is at least as old as 428 BC. There are more directly relevant literary examples, though. Let's look at a different take on this phenomenon, but this time from Japan. Consider Murasaki Shikibu's The Tale of Genji, written sometime before the year 1021 during the Heian Jidai. The Tale of Genji is a very, very long novel that follows the life and romantic affairs of one Hikaru Genji, the Shining Prince. He's a nobleman.
I'm loving these video game renditions of these, classic characters.
Celebrated for his refinement and charm, yet despite all his elegance, despite being able to court virtually any woman he pleases, he falls in love with Fujitsubo, his father's, the emperor's consort, a love which is strictly forbidden. Genji is denied his love, yet while feeling rejected and alienated, he stumbles upon Fujitsubo's young niece Murasaki. She's only 10 years old when they meet, but Genji is struck by how much Murasaki resembles his perfect idealized love. Let me give you an idea by reading you a passage. What an enchanting creature he had discovered. How right too his friends had been on that rainy night when they told him that on strange excursions, such as this, beauty might well be found lurking in unexpected quarters. How delightful to have strolled out by chance and at once made so astonishing a find. Whose could this exquisite child be? He would dearly love to have her always near him, to be able to turn to her at any moment for comfort and distraction, as once he had turned to the lady in the palace.
Okay. So what I'm getting here is that this is the Japanese version of Lolita, which puts a lot of things into context, a lot of proclivities, certain, or not even certain, of like many Japanese artists.
In Murasaki, then, Genji sees perfect beauty and wishes to do nothing more than to protect it and shelter it from the corruption of the world. Like Holden Caulfield, he becomes obsessed with innocence, convinced that it is forever out of his reach, but he can still preserve and perhaps indulge in the innocence that exists. In so doing, he subsumes the individuality and agency of Murasaki.
Yeah.
He destroys her autonomy and forces a prison upon her. Like a vampire, he feeds on the authenticity of a child still untouched by the world's corruption. He puts the joy and carefree adoration that comes with innocence on a pedestal. Despite being surrounded by refinement and adoration, Genji dismisses it all as inauthentic, pining instead for the authenticity he sees in innocence. But what meaningfulness he does grasp is transient, it's temporary. He attempts to bottle the comfort of innocence in order to escape the discomfort that is actually a prerequisite for personal growth. In so doing, Genji also never grows. He pursues new romances and seeks new substitutes for innocence. He tries to possess innocence rather than appreciate its passing nature, its impermanence. And thus he lacks what 18th century Japanese cultural scholar Motori Norinaga calls mono no aware, a bittersweet awareness of the impermanence of things that is integral to a meaningful and conscientious life.
Yep.
The reader feels immense mono no aware while reading the tale of Genji. We see Genji's longing, his losses, his loves that slip away, and the innocence that he can never truly capture. But Genji, the character, never does. He clings, he idealizes, he imprisons, he resents, he becomes bitter, and in so doing, he alienates himself. Alienated young men seeking authenticity and identity and obsession over innocence is nothing new. It's a tale as old as time, and it's a story that stretches across cultures. And just as this phenomenon has been observed throughout time, so too have the consequences of this phenomenon also been observed. Alienated young men who long for purpose and meaningfulness, for authenticity, find that authenticity in innocence, which seems uncorrupted by the inauthenticity and meaninglessness of adult life. These young men attempt to possess or preserve this innocence by idealizing it, creating at times these limerent prisons, mental fantasies that reality can never match. But innocence cannot be preserved, and so it slips away. What remains is bitterness, resentment, and deeper alienation, which only exacerbates feelings of isolation and despair until the young man, who has never faced the discomfort of life, becomes an old man who has never truly lived. There's a crucial difference, though, between the modern alienated young man and figures like Holden Caulfield or Hikaru Genji or Hippolytus, and that difference is context. Alienation for each of these characters was personal. Holden is an outlier in his time, an exception, as is Hippolytus, as is Genji. Each in their own way serves as a warning to the reader. Yet today, however, alienation...
I mean, I realize that they are, stories. They're stories rather than real life and stuff. I mean, I imagine if these... it's kind of rare for an author to come up with, whole cloth, a whole, basically archetype like that. The people who wrote these stories were probably based off of real life people, and if they were based off of real life people, those people were probably not unique outlier kind of cases. They're probably more people like them, and who were informing the writers of the time, their portrayals of these characters. So yeah, my mind is immediately going to as probably, like Mr. Is it Moon Channel? Like Mr. Moon Channel is saying, these depictions of them, the Greek, Japanese, and I guess the American Catherine Rye one, in those times, there was a group of people like that. Though I mean, yeah, the big difference between now and then would be that it'd be a little harder for these people to have a phrase, like organize together amongst each other and make it into a clear, distinct identity. Though, I mean, I could definitely see, in the case of the Genji example, I mean, that sounds like, how to phrase it. I could definitely see that being something that was more common among the upper class men of that time. And yeah, let me go back a little bit.
Holden is an outlier in his time, an exception, as is Hippolytus, as is Genji. Each in their own way serves as a warning to the reader. Yet today, however, alienation is systemic and is the global norm. That part is, the
specific type of alienation that many of us are experiencing now is basically a result of capitalism, which did not exist before, a couple centuries ago. But to be fair, that would cleanly put Holden within the sphere of people who are feeling alienated for the same reasons that you and I are feeling alienated. So I mean, he would basically be just a canary in the coal mine kind of situation.
We men and women alike are alienated from our personhood, our agency, our power to choose our destinies, and we are instead sold meaningfulness and identity for profit. The entire economy of the modern world is designed to sell you meaning. To quote French philosopher Guy Debord's opening line in his 1967 work Society of the Spectacle, in societies where modern conditions of production prevail, all of life presents itself as an immense accumulation of spectacles. Everything that was directly lived has moved away into a representation. Debord directly discusses how this representation of real experiences, this facsimile, this shadow on the cave walls serves to alienate people. And I quote, The alienation of the spectator to the profit of the contemplated object, which is the result of his own unconscious activity, is expressed in the following way. The more he contemplates, the less he lives. The more he accepts recognizing himself in the dominant images of need, the less he understands his own existence and his own desires. The externality of the spectacle in relation to the active man appears in the fact that his own gestures are no longer his, but those of another who represents them to him. This is why the spectator feels at home nowhere, because the spectacle is everywhere. Which is to say, the more we watch, the less we live. We are so alienated from ourselves that even our desires do not belong to us. They're taken, twisted, and sold back to us in a commodified form, and we end up feeling at home nowhere precisely because there is no place to hide from the spectacle, from the shadow on the cave wall, from the identity being sold to you.
And no place in reality. But there's there's that thing that we all have, that being our personal, individual thoughts and feelings that if you tap into, then all of a sudden these you have access to something. Well, not necessarily real, but certainly unique and individual to yourself. Which obviously people who've allowed themselves to become enamored with the spectacle are not gonna have. Or yeah. Basically, what I'm saying is part of the remedy for this sort of thing is to develop a connection with yourself, at least a little bit. Like don't alienate yourself. Basically, be a little non-alienated.
If you, like many of the young people watching this video, have never owned a home but would like to, let me ask you this: why do you want one?
Yeah, like I am. I guess a young person who will probably never own a home. But I'm like, how to phrase? Obviously there's practical reasons, like logical, pragmatic reasons to want to own a home, but that's very different from what Moon is about to talk about, where it's clearly these people they're not seeking a home because they have a personal, individual need for a home. They're seeking a home because they live in a society where having a home is just the thing to do. It's in fashion, essentially.
Common in many cultures for multiple generations to live under one roof. Why do you need your own home to feel complete? Is this home to shelter you, to give you a place to live, to keep you and your family warm, or
does this home have practical? Is it serving practical individual needs specific to you and your circumstances, or
is it because you've been taught to see home ownership as a marker of success?
Yep.
As a crucial part of fulfilling the American or European or Brazilian dream, as a sign of adulthood. You want a house because it's your dream, but the dream was not written by you, it was written for you. A house as a status, as an image of adulthood, to feed a market which demands housing prices perpetually rise. Though the desire feels personal, it has already been shaped, packaged, and handed back to you as if it were your own. And that brings us finally to K-On.
Yeah, that definitely seems like something. This is something I put in my notes for to talk about more at the end of the video, but some of this definitely feels like sort of the kind of things that I don't know how else to phrase it, but the minorities of a society are generally less susceptible to, because like I mentioned, when you're like a fucking 9-year-old kid watching learning about neo-Nazi racist skinheads, you can't. It's really difficult to be taken in by the promises of society, because you already know on some level, not even on some level, pretty much consciously and explicitly that this shit isn't for you. Society is not for you, so it's a lot easier to not be taken in by all that nonsense and to not develop that kind of delusional entitlement that is at the core of everything that Moon is talking about in this video. But yeah, Moon expands upon his house point to clarify in response to the top comment on the video. Oh, okay. I'll check that out. Hopefully I'll remember
Let me
it.
be very clear. K-On! Isn't evil, it's not that simple. It's merely a product that fulfills an economic niche where opportunity exists that was not previously filled.
Yeah.
However, the effect as it relates to the spectacle is nevertheless insidious, even if the damage it does is not by direct design. Let me explain. In Western animation, cartoons that feature school-aged teenage girls going on adventures are considered so-called girls' shows. These shows are written for girls, marketed to girls, and often produced at least nowadays by women. One might imagine then, if one is not well versed in anime, that K-On! As a show about little girls doing cute things might also be a girls' show, made for and marketed to young women. But it's not. In Japan, manga or graphic novels, and by proxy anime, are categorized generally into 4 demographic groups. There's shonen manga like One Piece or Naruto, which targets adolescent boys. There's shoujo manga like Sailor Moon or Oran High School Host Club, which targets adolescent girls. There's josei manga like Paradise Kiss, which targets adult women. And finally, there's seinen manga like Berserk and Akira, which target adult men. Let me ask you this, dear viewers. Which of these 4 categories does K-On! Belong to? I'll give you
Yeah, I'm gonna put 200 on seinen.
a big hint. It's not shoujo, not for adolescent girls. The answer is seinen.
Yep.
K-On! Was designed for and marketed to adult men. Which is to say, no, 4chan did not invent adult men loving cute and cuddly K-On! Cute and cuddly K-On! Was designed specifically for adult men, like those on 4chan. K-On! Was first serialized in Mangatan Kirara, a magazine which focuses on 4-panel seinen manga. And K-On! Is not the only cute, cuddly innocence bomb in this magazine for adult men. The whole magazine features manga series such as Suro Ustato, Yuyushiki, and Sancha Sanyo. I'll leave summaries of each of these manga on screen. Astute viewers among you may have noticed that all of these are about groups of cute little girls doing cute little girl things. But why? What is the appeal of cute little girl manga to adult men? The presumption I think many observers have is that the answer is perversion, prurience, obscenity. For some of these men, sure, obsession with innocence can manifest
It
as
ain't that
extremely
simple.
antisocial, prurient behavior. And we'll get to that. But this is not the prevailing reason behind the popularity of manga and anime like K-On! K-On!, you see, is often described as a moe anime or manga. Moe originally referred to a feeling of affection or protectiveness towards fictional characters, but has since evolved into an aesthetic term, describing the appearance of idealized innocence, cuteness, and purity. Moe characters are designed to evoke in the viewer a sense of protectiveness, comfort, and warmth. Imagine big round sparkling eyes, tiny little mouths, soft gentle expressions, and a shy demeanor. The Moe characters like a Murasaki to Genji or a Phoebe to Holden, but who will never grow old, never hurt you, and never make you uncomfortable. The innocence of a Moe character can be adored forever. And anime/manga like K-On!, which are especially comforting, especially blissful even, are categorized in Japan as iyashikei, a healing type. Iyashikei emerged in the late 90s as a popular subgenre of slice of life, meeting media portrayals of everyday life. The late 90s was a time of substantial turmoil in Japan. There was the Great Hanshin earthquake, the Tokyo subway sarin gas attacks, and of course the aftermath of the economic collapse. Paul Roquette, a professor of Japanese studies at MIT, states in his article Ambient Literature and the Aesthetics of Calm, Mood Regulation in Contemporary Japanese Fiction, as published in the Journal of Japanese Studies, that these traumatic events provided, and I quote, the emotional context for the emergence of calm as a lucrative and marketable feeling. There's a danger, though, in treating commodified escapism and treating a lucrative and marketable feeling as if it were healing medicine. A medicine is meant to cure you, to move you forward. A commodity, however, is meant to keep you coming back for more.
Yeah.
Instead of healing your alienation, then, the iyashikei entrenches it, slowly.
You see similar things with dating apps where it's like a dating app that gets you a partner that you're satisfied and like fulfilled with is like it's a very bad dating app because that means you're like literally shrinking your customer pool, and like why on earth would you do that if you're trying to make money?
Transforming comfort into dependency. K-On! Then, and media like it, turn innocence into an endlessly purchasable refuge to indulge in. The modern young man feels alienated. He craves authenticity, longs for innocence, for a life uncorrupted by the fakeness of the world. And K-On! Offers that innocence in a purified visual form. It promises intimacy without the discomfort of reciprocity. You can ask, "Where's my hug?" and always receive a big warm hug from your fictional daughter or little sister instead of an uncomfortable no thanks from an acquaintance. But it is in that no thanks that one experiences discomfort, that one learns, that one changes and grows. Why did I get an awkward no thanks? How do I conduct myself in the future? How can I grow? With moe anime, with yashike, there is never a no thanks and thus no growth ever occurs. The commodity provides the young man with a perpetual refuge of healing calm. The refuge, however, is artificial. The innocence never fades, never encounters resistance, never grows. Instead of being healed, the viewer becomes entrenched in a loop of fantasy designed to be consumed endlessly. He grows comfortable in his dependency, which removes him further and further from an authentic and meaningful life, even as his bitterness and anger towards the outside world grows. It's almost like Huxley's Brave New World, right? It is sedation sold as healing, and it creates a society without discomfort, and thus without maturation or growth. The end point of this cycle, then, is the hikikomori. Hikikomori is a Japanese term which describes young people, mostly young men, but not exclusively, who withdraw entirely from society. They don't work, they don't go to school, and they rarely leave their rooms. Instead, they retreat into the media they consume, such as video games, manga, and anime. Without the imprisoning aspect of consumption, there is no hikikomori. They're not just lying in bed all day, they do stuff. They talk about anime, they watch their favorite shows. They often even buy merch with a small allowance given to them by enabling family who are just happy to see them interested in anything at all. And yet, the more they consume their healing anime, the further away from their actual desires they get, and thus the more and more alienated they feel. The default state then of the hikikomori is one of extreme apathy. The days come and go, and the years pass, and nothing seems to change. But underneath the veneer of apathy, there is a deep and extreme resentment that is paired with extreme guilt. Why am I...
This is making me think. I mean, in my branding, I refer to myself as the hermit, which is not too. Obviously in like modern day life, you can't be like a literal hermit, but as much as it is possible to do that in modern day society, I basically live as a hermit. As I was thinking about what is the difference between a hermit and a hikikomori, or I suppose to personalize it more, like what's the difference between me and these men? Is there a difference? I mean, I think there is. I mean, maybe a non-biased third party would say otherwise, but I definitely. I mentioned it in big and small ways throughout this video. But a lot of stuff I don't relate to. I don't relate to that resentment towards the world for not being quote unquote perfect or whatever. I'll go a little further, see if I have more to say.
Why am I here? What about my actual desires, like having a family or finding a loved one?
I think a big difference between me and these people is just that I have completely kind of just eschewed all these sort of societal, what society's presented as the goal to strive for. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be a writer and an artist for God knows what reason. I don't remember. I was 7 years old when it happened. So there's always been this sense of like the reason I'm doing all this shit, going to school, going to work, whatever. It's so that I can fund my personal, individual goal of becoming an artist, and everything else is just kind of like, it'd be cool if I could own a house. It'd be cool if I could, get a relationship, maybe even start a family, some crazy shit like that. But I mean, all that stuff is optional. The only thing that is not optional is becoming an artist, and that's perhaps because it's so divorced and ironically alienated from the mainstream societal goals that are pushed on everyone, but especially these disaffected young men. Maybe that's why I was able to escape this sort of pipeline, despite flirting with it a bit as a young teen, as someone around Holden's age.
Naturally arrives at then is that the system has failed them, and they're right. The extremely profit-driven, commodified world we live in, by nature, alienates us from our true selves and our potential, from discomfort and from personal growth. This is why the spectator feels at home nowhere, because the spectacle is everywhere. The resentment is fair, it's legitimate even, but the desperation and resentment creates a fertile field for bad faith actors to offer false solutions, which, instead of breaking down the system that is the root of the alienation, reinforces that system and strengthens it, while seeking scapegoats to protect the system and maintain its profitability for its wealthiest beneficiaries, even as it only further alienates the young person from their potential.
Yep, any good society's got to have some way of rediverting any revolutionary impulse into something that's actually societally reinforcing. Otherwise, it would have long since been converted into some new society.
The hikikomori feels abandoned by the institutions which were meant to help him, by schools, by businesses, by government, by family. He feels bitterness at being a fish judged by his ability to climb trees instead of his ability to swim. And as has been his nature, he seeks the easy answer, one that does not disrupt his supply of comfort and innocence. It then becomes all too simple for, let's be frank, far-right ideologies, which at their core are fundamentally inseparable from a profit-driven world, to offer scapegoats and explanations for his suffering. Scapegoats which punch down and not up, which only deepen
let me look at that. We've seen this screenshot earlier in the video, but I didn't have a chance to really read it. I'm definitely taking a lot of interest in this bottom line, or the ending lines, where it's like these stories from their very outset reject the proposition of eternal struggle, suffering, degradation, corruption, collapse, globalism. Oh God, oh Lord, I didn't read the last sentence, but good God, it's an implicit declaration of the 14 words, whatever equivalent is for your ethnic group. This part I was gonna highlight, because I mean, yeah, this is the kind of thing that if you are any sort of minority in any culture, then like, yeah, you kind of have to accept this as a fact of life from like a really young age. So like you can't harbor these delusions of purity and innocence and this idea of like, a perfect happy world or whatever. Like it doesn't exist, because the society you live in is obviously not made for you. Like it was not made with your personal convenience or felicity in mind. Like, I want to say just that experience inoculates you from all this goofy ass shit, but there are unfortunately, plenty of minorities in every definition or sense or angle of that word that somehow, one way or the other, fall for this claptrap.
For his suffering, scapegoats which punch down and not up, which only deepen his alienation and extract even greater profitability from him, seizing not only his wallet, but his very passions and soul, directing the energy and motivation he could have otherwise used to escape his prison towards reinforcing its walls and destroying the adversaries of his captors. The Japanese far-right blames immigrants for all of its societal problems too, even though it has very little illegal immigration or indeed immigration at all. By pointing, for example, at immigrants, you needn't disrupt the true source of the alienation, and indeed more alienation only helps your cause if you are fueling your movement by manipulating the desperate. I've even spoken on this alienation and media loop before in the video on gacha games and gender war in South Korea.
Yep, I've seen.
And so I
didn't realize it at first, but I've seen this guy's videos. I think he also did one about why JRPGs always end up with you killing God or something like that. I think that was his video as well. But yeah, this guy's a very, very good video essayist and content creator.
A perfect subject for online radicalization. When he then chooses his avatar, the mask through which others will see him, he is so estranged from himself that he cannot project his own image. Instead, he adopts the picture of a cute anime girl, the very innocence he cannot possess, the warmth and meaningfulness he most yearns for, that he puts on a pedestal, worn outwardly as his identity. Hikikomori is a Japanese term, but the condition is not uniquely Japanese. In one of my earlier videos, I predicted that what was happening in Japan both economically and socially would soon come to the West, and I think now that the result is undeniable. The hikikomori and the incel are cut from the same cloth and fall victim to the same predators. They are victims of the world. Incel communities will even discourage users who are too young from joining them. You still have a chance, they say. Don't be dragged down by us. Keion and Iyashike aren't unique to Japan either. We had our own Iyashike moment here in the West that affected just as many of our young men. Y'all remember the brony phenomenon? It came from the same root of meaningfulness found in the simplicity of innocence, only because My Little Pony isn't a seinen and is, for lack of a better term, a shoujo. There was no market mechanism in place to entrap this male audience, and the audience escaped into the wider world with a lot of growth and personal development alongside it. A lot of your favorite content creators started making content in the My Little Pony space and grew out of it into themselves.
I mean, honestly, I had not a phase. But, I mean, I definitely had like a for lack of a better word, I had a phase where I would watch a lot of My Little Pony reactions. I mean, I think that's probably how I got into Flaming Shark, who was an OG reactor in the reacting space. But I mean, yeah, My Little Pony's got a lot of great characters, a lot of good stories, and there's been lots of fun fan content made about it. I mean, there's some really great fanfic that come out from it. But yeah.
Over the ravine. Ugh.
There are a lot of trans women who discovered themselves and grew into themselves thanks to exposure to the brony community. I will note that Iyashike and even Keion is like this as well to a lesser extent. It's not all bad, and we must not forget that any nuanced observation of these trends requires us to think in terms not of black and white, or good or bad, but in gray and with nuance.
A lot of crayfish.
But I digress. Some bronies never engaged with the discomfort of emerging into the wider.
Let me look at this. That's a hilarious, like, Death Note is made for Republicans, but is watched by the gays. I mean, yeah, I guess.
World and entrenched themselves into the alienation and obsession over innocence. And thus you have the rather peculiar Nazi pony phenomenon too. Internal feelings of alienation, born of a market-driven society, can be easily co-opted by the market towards defending the interests of the market, thereby deepening the alienation. The market, in other words, sells a healing salve for the loneliness it creates. The market, in other words.
Yeah. Good lord, the Nagatoro discourse. I'm someone who... Well, honestly, I don't put that much effort into avoiding sort of Twitter nonsense, but I handily avoid it because I guess I've curated my feed well enough that it only really shows me art from other artists. But even me, someone who's basically siloed off in their own little corner of Twitter, saw this shit going on in the Nagatoro. I guess in the anime space when Nagatoro was airing, it was like, good lord. Lots of blocked profiles in those days.
It creates, and the consumer, in seeking relief, becomes an endlessly monetizable product. The alienation itself becomes a commodity, and the lonely and alienated become conscripted into a defense of their captors, waging war against their liberators. So we understand now how shows like K-On! Can appeal to alienated young men and assist in their radicalization. Why do these alienated young men, the eventual Twitter Nazis, specifically gravitate to K-On! And not some other show or manga? In our literary analysis so far, we've discussed The Catcher in the Rye, The Myth of Hippolytus, and The Tale of Genji. But there's one more influential novel that cannot be avoided in our discussion of K-On!, and that is Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita. I know, just the title drop hits like a ton of bricks, but bear.
Okay, I'm making jokes about pre-watch allegations that people are gonna actually start thinking. That
with me. The book opens with the confessions of one Humbert, a man awaiting trial for murder in an American prison. He recounts to an imagined jury his romantic and sexual obsession with a 12-year-old girl, Dolores Hayes, whom he calls Lolita. After the accident,
this actress is not a 12-year-old, but I don't begrudge the the director or movie maker, or whatever, for not putting a 12-year-old in this position.
Death of Dolores' mother. Humbert abducts Dolores, posing as her guardian as he takes her around the United States, hiding out in motels or roadside towns along the way. Humbert frames their travels as if they were lovers on a romantic holiday, but underneath Nabokov's rather beautiful prose, there is the connected sense of horror that the reader gets, as they contextualize the terrible abuse suffered by Dolores against Humbert's flowery narration of events. Humbert himself knows that he is committing a monstrous act, but he cannot face his behavior as monstrous. To do so would destroy the edifice of his ego, the image he has of himself, and the facade of innocence he has lost himself in. He converts the unspeakable into the ostensibly beautiful or even romantic by exerting control over his shame. As we've discussed at length, the obsession over innocence is nothing new. When Lolita was first translated into Japanese back in 1959, Japan was still rebuilding from the destruction of World War II. And as the Japanese economy moved from austerity to consumption, homegrown industries emerged, selling products and ultimately lifestyles to young people, even as the Japanese people as a whole yearned for an escape from the tragedy of war and all that was lost. In so doing, innocence and youth emerged as commodified products. The adolescent girl in particular.
Yep, I've heard it referred to quite explicitly as the cult of kawaii, which is like, yeah, in no uncertain terms, it was Japan basically did a whole big revamp of their image after the horrors that they committed in World War II, kind of thing.
Emerged as a symbol of lost time, unattainable purity, and nostalgic joy. Consider like every Studio Ghibli film, right? And how Miyazaki always contrasts the guilt and shame of society against the innocence and purity of an adolescent girl. Miyazaki notably detests the despoilation of his image of innocence, which is to say the aptly named wider Japanese cultural phenomenon of the 1970s, Rorita Kompuretsu, or Lolita Complex, where this obsession with youthful innocence becomes tangled in sexuality. You might be more familiar with the complex's abbreviated name Lolicon, which today represents a widely available and completely legal genre of prurient, largely obscene media marketed towards young men, full of commodified innocence for them to lust after. K-On!, however, unlike more obviously obscene materials, permits the indulgence but removes the guilt. K-On! Supplies the viewer with a moral alibi of sorts. The viewer can indulge in longing and attachment while telling himself it's pure and not perverse. K-On! Isn't totally pure though, and it does touch on prurience in a way that ever so slightly betrays its intentions. In Season 1, the shy and adorable Mio accidentally trips and falls on stage, flashing her underwear at the audience. An audience member then snaps a picture, and this catapults Mio into popularity in-universe with references back to this gag throughout the show. K-On! Then manages to walk a very fine tightrope, which few other shows have successfully emulated. It's perfectly pure, with just a wink and a nudge to its target audience. It's just a joke, the viewers will say. The indulgence is okay, there's no guilt here. On top of this moral alibi, K-On! Distinguishes itself by framing the audience as being almost a part of the band. You're like a ghost that haunts a perfect universe, able to witness it but never grasp it. In Love Live, a different girl band show, you're in more of a parasocial relationship, you're a fan or supporter. In Bocce the Rock, you're meant to put yourself in Bocce's shoes. She's a self-insert who externalizes the loneliness and alienation of the viewer. But K-On! Allows you to soak yourself head to toe in the innocent alienation of the
Oh my god, I've seen this. I've seen this fucking tweet. Like,
viewer. But K-On! Allows you to
I don't
soak
feel like
yourself
reading it.
head to toe in the innocence, to bathe in it, while also keeping a distance between you, the observer, and the girls. K-On! Is notable as well for its total lack of conflict. Remember that discomfort is necessary for growth. Love Live discusses ambition, performances, and failures. Bocce struggles with anxiety. But the world of K-On! Depends on the exclusion of adulthood and the struggles that come with it. Aesthetically, then, the indulgences of K-On! Map nicely onto the mythos of far-right thinking, a desire for imposed order over natural chaos, a black and white moral certainty over nuance or complexity, and an idealized past over a fallen present. The fascist comes across as permanently 12 because that's precisely what they yearn for. Childhood, a time when things were ordered for them, when everything was yes or no without nuance, and when times were good and not hard. Because the goodness of the times were never their responsibility. And what is K-On! But an indulgence of that very phenomenon, of being permanently 12. In Greek mythology, the sirens lured sailors to their deaths with beautiful songs and illusory promises. The innocence trap of K-On! Is nothing if not a modern siren, calling out to alienated young men with the promise of warmth, only to consume them instead. The song offers what the world denies: intimacy, belonging, carefree smiles, and soft, cuddly hugs. Yet once sold, once commodified, even tenderness becomes an illusion. If you happen to like K-On!, if you love the show and it's meaningful to you, that's fine, that's great. Not every K-On! Watcher or person with a K-On! Avatar is a Nazi or alienated. That's not what I'm saying. I'm sure someone in the comments will share a dubious anecdote wherein
Yeah, I saw a thief. Yep, you're back from work, and you appreciate. Yeah, I definitely am a big fan of Moon stuff. It doesn't show up in my feed that often, so I don't get to watch it too often. But yeah, I always enjoy it when I watch it. Yeah.
K-On! Helped them find the love of their life or something. I'm not condemning K-On! Or its fans. I'm merely pointing out the effect that shows like K-On! Can have on their vulnerable target audience, developing and furthering their alienation. The effect that K-On! Has on young men isn't the fault of those men. It's not the fault of K-On!'s writers. It's not the fault of K-On!'s publishers, or even of Kyoto Animation. The problem begins not with the snake oil cure.
Yeah, I mean, it's been ages since I saw this, I guess, pyramid, but yeah, very. Like, imagining a modernized version of this, it's funny because like we would probably replace the "We Fool You" clergy and theology with like freaking bread and circuses entertainment, basically. But otherwise I think it'd be pretty similar in terms of who shoots you and who rules you.
But with the disease. Not with the beauty of the song, but with the loneliness of the sea. The problem starts at the roots. Alienated young men have always existed in the West and in Japan, but the circumstances are different. Hippolytus dies, Genji never finds fulfillment, Holden's sister inevitably grows old, Dolores breaks free. But K-On! And shows like it are immortal. Innocence never fades, the siren song never ends, and the alienation is perpetual. This is the difference. The viewer is never even given the chance to escape. Capital is like the air. It completely fills any vessel that holds it. In a market-driven society,
I kind of unrelated to the content of the video, but don't think I don't hear that rendition of Cruel Angel's thesis. I appreciate it.
Market must fill every empty space where profit could exist. But there are places where profit shouldn't exist, where a rational society shouldn't want markets, and one of those places is the heart. Holden Caulfield wasn't wrong for feeling alienated, neither are you. Your alienation is valid, and it is by design. How then do you overcome your alienation in a world so deeply designed to separate you from yourself? The answer is, you must confront the alienation and experience discomfort. You are so afraid of being cringe that you never experience the awkwardness that comes with it and thus are never able to grow out of it. You remain eternally cringe as a result. I was once a brony myself. I'm not afraid to tell you, even if it's cringe, because that cringy exploration, however uncomfortable or childish it was, helped me to grow. I'm not even going to qualify that statement, though it's tempting to, because the urge to qualify is a wall of the cage. I don't need to sell you on my social status or career or wealth. It doesn't matter. I'm happy with this part of me. And you may think it's cringe or not cringe, but I am free, and that's what matters. The Moon channel you know today wouldn't exist without the brony community. Neither would the lovely art produced by my dear friend and co-creator Larita Shine. When you go out and you put yourself out there and you risk being cringe, you realize everyone is cringe in some way. As you embrace yourself, you may end up finding people who are cringy in the same way that you are. In so doing, you and your friends may be cringe, but you are free as well. You are authentically yourselves. You and your belonging and your connections and your relationships and your warm, cuddly hugs are real. And that freedom to be who you are, not what the world or your parents or TikTok or the political influencer tells you to be, is self-actualization, is wholeness of the self. You'll note, I did not tell you what that wholeness means for you. I leave you with what the commodified world does not. I leave you with your agency, with your power to choose. Who you are is for you to find out, and not for me nor anyone else to tell you or sell you. I've been your host, Mooney. I understand that this video diverges a bit from my usual content, but I hope you enjoyed it nevertheless. You might have noticed this video
he says it diverges from his usual content, but this it's from what I've seen, this feels kind of well within his wheelhouse.
Sponsored. I've been trying to move the channel away from sponsored content, so I sincerely appreciate your support on Patreon. Joining Patreon also means you get an invite to the Moon Channel Discord, where you might find some new like-minded friends. You'll also find this week's credits gag there, a song parody I sang just for you, available for free, which can't be shown on YouTube due to copyright restrictions. Moon Channel donates 10% of its income to Doctors Without Borders, so I am deeply grateful for your views, likes, and subscriptions. A special thanks to co-creator Larita Shine for the art, inspiration, and guidance. To Silva Gunner for the music, to Moon Channel's dearly beloved patrons without whom none of this would be possible, and of course, to viewers like you. Thank you for tuning in to Moon Channel.
All right, so a decent amount of notes, I guess, or I really use them like observations. But yeah, I think. I mean, having watched the whole video, I think my initial suspicion that things being too idealized and thus reality becomes disappointing was more or less on the mark. I mean, I think I didn't factor in the idea that the specific desire for, or rather, how to phrase it, like the idea of it being manufactured and put in you, this maybe not the search for the idealized thing and the pure thing, but more like the shape that it takes kind of thing. I don't know, but yeah, definitely. I talked about several times in the video, like this obsession with like innocence and purity being just utterly alien to me, and kind of hard to understand in the live sense. I mean, obviously I've seen it enough that I kind of know the I guess the genre conventions of it, but I don't really understand it from a first person perspective, I guess. And to a certain extent, even after this video, I don't get it like that. Though I suppose, I mean, basically it's just what happens when it's one avenue, one possible fate of people who, I guess, alienate themselves from themselves. So, yeah, it was interesting. I mean, this is something people have been noting for years, decades at this point. But it's interesting how this is specifically mostly an affliction of young men, not young women. And then also, I imagine it's not just young men, but like as the notes suggest, not necessarily. Like, it's not necessarily about being white men, because obviously like Genji and Hippolytes were not white men, but they were presumably not minorities in their culture. So it's young non-minority men, I guess. So I mean, I guess the idea that I'm getting at, like the thrust of this sort of gesturing I'm doing, is like, it's people who, it's dispossessed members of the dominant group in whatever society we're talking about, where like they feel entitled to these certain things, these certain rights or privileges or comforts even, that are supposed to be I guess the rights of people in their social class, but for one reason or another, usually social control and whatnot like that, they are not granted these rights, and then because of that, they end up developing this resentment towards everything that then gets co-opted into a force for maintaining the status quo, the very status quo that has left them so resentful and so entitled, really. But yeah, You know, yeah, and more specifically, like, yeah, it's especially that, I think, you know, that non-minority status that comes with this kind of just inability to imagine, or not even imagine, like this great unwillingness and even resistance towards the idea of, you know, the idea that we can change anything at all. Like, not even like, you can't change yourself to better accommodate yourself to the state of the world, so you end up just being resentful, just resentment without any outlet or you know means of venting. And you can't change the world to better accommodate the state of yourself. So it ends. So again, you end up right back towards this resentment that has nowhere to go, and it can just endlessly build on itself. And, you know, that's something that's much harder to cultivate in minorities, because, you know, you either you find some way to adapt yourself to this shitty world and be in that way find a way to channel the resentments and other negative feelings that this crappy world kind of naturally engenders in you, or you know, it can be both, but, you know, for the sake of pithiness, you know, or you seek to adapt the world to yourself. And in other words, you try to change the world, presumably for the better, even if it's just better for you specifically. And in that process, you know, you create, once again, you know, another avenue for creating the psychic infrastructure that can, like, move around these feelings of resentment and turn them into something that is at least generative in some way, at least does something. But yeah, another thing that stood out to me was this. I mean, it's crazy to me that anyone would describe this. I mean, to me, the realities of life, where you have to, you know, you gotta accept that the world was not made for your personal convenience and felicity. In the wake of this basic fact, you know, you gotta change yourself, you gotta adapt to the world, or change the world and adapt the world to yourself. It's crazy to me that people would describe that as trials of adulthood. It's like, I mean, even kids have to deal with that shit. Like, and to be fair, it's kind of worse for kids, because when you're a child, you have even less, like, you're kind of just consigned to adapting yourself to the world, and there's not much you can do to make the world adapt to yourself, other than just be lucky and be born to you know, a family who is willing to accommodate, you know, to accommodate some of your desires and whatnot, and, you know, do some work to make the world a little more you know, nicer for you. But I mean, yeah, as a child, your main agency is changing yourself to accommodate yourself to the world. And it's only as you become an adult that you gain any sort of ability, any sort of agency to make the world accommodate itself to you. So it's kind of, I mean, in either way, whether we're talking about kids who have to change themselves for the world, or adults who can change the world for themselves, like, in either case, like, it's so silly to me that you would describe childhood as some idyllic place where everything is perfect, and adulthood as some dystopic place where everything is imperfect. Like, it's, I mean, again, these are the kinds of delusions that are really difficult for any sort of minority person or population to, like, harbor. Like, you can't, that kind of shit does not, like, if you're thinking that kind of stuff as a woman, or a black person, or someone with a disability, like, the world will very quickly, you know, disabuse you of these notions for you. But, yeah. I guess in a sort of similar it's somewhat related thing, like how the innocence of young girls specifically being contrasted against the kind of non-innocence of adult women from the perspective of these disillusioned, often, but not unfortunately not always, non-minority men. You know, more often than not, just being this desire for like a low effort, or more often not even no effort, relationship with big air quotes, where once again you do not have to accommodate yourself, and even the world itself does not have to accommodate itself to you, because that's effort. Making the world accommodate itself to you is effort that you have to expend. Yeah, very, very, very lovely video. Yeah, Moon Channel is just great. It's kind of funny because I am a part of another community that has, like, I'm part of the One of the Girlfriends community as well, and they have another moon themed video content creator as a similarly sort of calming voice, and well, like, they don't make content as, how do I phrase this? There are differences between the content they make and the content that Moon Channel makes, but I don't know. I noticed some similarities in sort of the presentation and whatnot that were just interesting. Just things only people who also are in the One of the Girlfriends community would be able to relate to. But yeah, great video. Definitely should start watching more of Moon's videos. I mean, yeah, you saw that I was like aware of like several of his videos, like the RPG thing and the some other third one that I can't remember at the moment, but yeah, definitely big recommendations for this guy. So yeah, with that, that'll be the end of today's stream. Really, it really has some good discussion, I guess. Yeah, very transformative content wise, I hope. But yeah. All right. So yeah, as always, thank you very much for watching. Consider liking, commenting. Oh, the BGM is not playing. Let me fix that. Yeah. Consider liking, commenting, maybe even subscribing. I'll be doing this again on Friday, assuming no like emergent situations happen. I have to like skip that stream. But yeah, anyway, until then, until next time, take care.